The most important fact about the alarm clock in this record is also the most inconvenient. The supplied evidence does not document its origin, its adoption, or any change it made to human sleep. The title says, "An alarm clock destroyed our sleep." The archive provided here cannot establish that conclusion. That is not a minor missing detail. It is the difference between a history and a story that merely sounds historical. To explain how alarm clocks changed sleep, we would need evidence about sleep before alarms, the earliest documented alarms, the people who used them, and the conditions under which their use spread. None of that appears in the supplied source. What the record does provide is a definition of anthropology, the scientific study of humanity across biology and sociology, concerned with human behavior, human biology, cultures, societies, and language in both the present and the past. That definition tells us what kinds of questions an investigation could ask. It does not supply the answers. The distinction matters because the alarm clock sits at the intersection of several questions. One concerns behavior, when people rise. Another concerns culture, why a particular waking time is valued. Another concerns biology, what sleep is and how it varies. Yet another concerns language and meaning, what people imply when they describe sleep as disciplined, wasted, healthy, lazy, early, or late. Anthropology, as described in the source, crosses those boundaries. Social anthropology studies patterns of behavior. Cultural anthropology studies cultural meaning, including norms and values. Biological anthropology studies human biology and evolution. Linguistic anthropology studies how language influences social life. An alarm clock history could involve all four, but possibility is not proof. The familiar modern assumption is easy to recognize as a question. Did a mechanical signal force human sleep into a new schedule? The stronger version appears in the title, "Did the alarm clock destroy our sleep?" Those are compelling propositions. The supplied evidence offers no comparison between people who used alarms and people who did not, and no historical sequence connecting the device to a transformation. Without that sequence, even the word "changed" becomes unstable. It could refer to bedtime, waking time, sleep duration, interrupted sleep, attitudes toward punctuality, or the authority of schedules. These are not interchangeable outcomes. Evidence for one would not automatically establish the others. Evidence that waking practices changed would not by itself prove that sleep was destroyed. The word "forever" demands even more. It implies a lasting transformation, not a brief fashion or a limited practice. Demonstrating that would require documentation across time, places, societies, or institutions. The source contains no such chronology. It supplies no earliest evidence, no first known use, no inventor, no popularizer, and no account of persistence. So the world before the alarm clock cannot be reconstructed from this pack. We cannot responsibly say how ancient humans slept, whether prehistoric sleep followed a single pattern, or how communities organized waking. Those subjects may fall within anthropology, but the definition of a discipline cannot substitute for findings produced by that discipline. This is where familiar origin stories often gain an unfair advantage. A neat contrast invites itself. Once, human beings supposedly slept according to nature. Then a clock arrived and imposed artificial time. It is vivid. It is also a causal narrative. The supplied evidence does not establish either side of that contrast, so presenting it as history would manufacture the decisive force the episode is supposed to reveal. Nor can the gap be filled with an inventor's dramatic moment. No person is named in the evidence. No workshop, household, factory, institution, patent, bell, dial, or mechanism is documented. There is no supported date on which an alarm clock first appeared, and no basis for distinguishing an invention from an earlier practice or a later popularization. That distinction is essential. The earliest documented form of an object is not necessarily the moment it became widespread. A first known use is not always an invention. Popularization is not the same as origin. and a later explanation of why something appeared is not automatically evidence of the original motive. Here, the record supplies none of those stages. The unexpected layer, then, is not a hidden mechanism inside the clock. It is the weakness of the claim outside it. The title turns a complex human subject into a single culprit. But the one supplied source defines anthropology precisely as a field spanning behavior, biology, culture, society, and language. That breadth warns against reducing human sleep to one object without evidence. A clock could be studied as an object. Waking could be studied as behavior. Expectations about waking could be studied as norms and values. The language people use about sleep could be studied as part of social life. Biological sleep could be studied as human biology. A credible account would need to show how those layers connect, rather than assuming that their proximity proves causation. Consider the hidden steps inside the title's argument. First, sleep must have had a demonstrable earlier pattern. Second, alarm clocks must have entered that pattern at a documentable point. Third, their adoption must have altered behavior. Fourth, the alteration must have affected sleep rather than only the timing of waking. Finally, the effect must have endured strongly enough to justify forever. Not one of those steps is documented in the supplied excerpt. This does not prove that alarm clocks had no influence. Absence of evidence in this pack is not evidence of no historical effect. It means the effect remains unestablished here. The responsible conclusion is narrower than the title, but it is also more exact. The same restraint applies to the word destroyed. That word contains a judgment as well as a proposed outcome. To support it, the record would need some defined loss: less sleep, poorer sleep, a vanished pattern, or a documented change regarded as harmful. No such measure or historical assessment appears in the source. There is therefore no supported standard by which destruction could be declared. Medical adjacent claims require particular care. Sleep concerns human biology, but the pack provides no sleep research, health authority, clinical evidence, or historical medical source. It would be improper to diagnose modern viewers, describe a universal natural schedule, or offer current guidance. The supplied material supports only the observation that biological anthropology studies human biology and evolution. Likewise, search terms such as ancient humans, prehistoric humans, sleep history, and sleep science identify audience interest. They are not evidence. A requested question can guide an investigation, but it cannot answer itself. Repeating those phrases would create the appearance of coverage while leaving the historical claim exactly where it began. Unsupported. Woon. What then survives when the unsupported certainty is removed? A legitimate framework. Human sleep can be approached as more than biology alone. Patterns of behavior matter. Cultural meanings, norms, and values matter. Language can influence social life. Present practices can be compared with the past. The source establishes anthropology's concern with all of these domains, though not their specific relationship to alarms. That framework also reveals why the object feels consequential. The question is not merely what an alarm clock is. The deeper question is how an object might become entangled with expectations about time and behavior. But might must remain might until a record demonstrates the connection. Interpretation can organize evidence. It cannot replace missing evidence. A documented episode would therefore need sources that this pack does not contain. Records establishing early forms, evidence separating first use from broad adoption, accounts of the settings in which alarms operated, and research capable of comparing sleep or waking practices over time. It would also need to identify uncertainty wherever evidence conflicts or survives unevenly. Only then could the transformation be narrated. Only then could we say what came before, what changed, what persisted, and what the modern alarm inherited from earlier forms. Only then could a counterintuitive origin emerge from historical contrast instead of being forced into existence by a dramatic title. The central question can therefore be resolved only at the level the evidence permits. No decisive force that changed human sleep is documented in the supplied record. The alarm clock is named as the topic and accused by the title, but the source establishes neither the accusation nor an alternative history. And that absence makes the familiar object newly legible in an unexpected way. Before asking whether a clock destroyed sleep, we have to separate biology from behavior from cultural value, invention from popularization, and influence from blame. The supplied evidence tells us that humanity can be studied across those boundaries. It does not tell us that one device crossed them and changed sleep forever.